Last year, student loan debt in the United States topped $1 trillion, and that number is expected to increase. Joining me to discuss this trend, we have the chair of the Senate Higher Education and Workforce Development Committee, Senator Terri Bonoff. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Julie, for having me.
I want to begin with the statistic, and more so, as recently as just Monday, the president signed an executive order expanding a current law where borrowers pay no more than 10% of their monthly income to payments for student loan debt. And the federal government will renegotiate with federal loan providers to try and lower some interest rates. The U.S. Senate has even a more expansive program that it's trying to get passed. So this warrants a bigger question, in my opinion, Senator. Is this a state or a federal issue to try to reduce student debt?
I think it is a federal issue and a state issue. I think it's one of the most pressing issues of our time when we say that the student debt is actually greater than credit card debt. And it's a burden that I think our new emerging young people coming out of education cannot afford to bear, that we will pay the price of that as a society and as an economy. And so just for example, last session, that was one of our 3 things we wanted to accomplish, is lower the debt for our students. And so we passed a bill that said the Office of Higher Ed has to come back to us in this next session with a plan to refinance student debt to the state's credit rate. So for example, they could go from 8% down to 3% by next June in Minnesota.
So Madam Chair, historically speaking, public colleges and universities get nearly all of their revenue from state and local funding, tuition, and fees. Now, given the budget constraints nationwide, do you think that this funding formula is sustainable?
I don't think it's sustainable. I think we have to find new models. So again, hearkening back to what we did this session, I'm proud to announce the launch of a project we're calling the Pipeline Project. Pipeline stands for Private Investment, Public Education, Labor Industry Experience. We used as an example the Buehler Corporation in my district. They're a manufacturing company that is based in Europe, opened a North American office here in Plymouth, Minnesota. They interviewed high school students, picked 3 high school students right off the bat, put them in Dunwoody for 3 years. They're paying for them to go to Dunwoody, learn what they want them to learn, work at their company. They're paying them to work at their company, and when they're done, they will have jobs at Buehler. They've done this now 3 years in a row. They've got 3 cohorts. It's working. So what our new legislation says is that in 4 emerging industries, agriculture, IT, advanced manufacturing, and health sciences, we're going to create industry councils that are going to say, what do these kids need to learn for a 2-year degree, for a 4-year degree to hit the ground running? The business community says our kids don't have the skills they need. Well, let's bring them to the table. Let's help them design the program and ask for their financial support to make sure our kids, number one, can afford college, but then are ready to be their employees in their future.
Do you think it's still the role of the legislature to be watchdog, per se, of operational expenses from the colleges and universities and salaries, et cetera? Do you think that the onus falls on the legislature to keep these in line?
I think we have an oversight responsibility that we take very seriously. So we enacted performance funding initiatives 2 years ago when I began as chairperson. Before, we had 1% of the institution's funding would be held back for different performance metrics. We increased that to 5, and then we made one of them a prominent reduction of administrative expenses. And since we've done that, you'll hear both the university and MnSCU talking quite often about their efforts to reduce administration. And they would have done that, I think, regardless, but I think having that partnership where we are saying we're accountable to the taxpayers to make sure any dollars we spend are going to the best possible place, which is the classroom and the student. Or in the university's case, they have a 3-pronged mission to research as well and their community mission.
Where do you think the true emphasis needs to be in trying to ease students' debt? Do you think it needs to be on the interest rate of these student loans? Do you think it needs to be in keeping tuition low? Where do you think the focus should be?
I think, first of all, we should look at the overall cost of higher ed. I think it's too expensive. I think we have a constitutional mandate to provide each and every student with an excellent education. And in the past, we considered that K-12. Well, research shows us that's not the case anymore. K-12 is no longer K, it's E, and 12 is no longer enough when we say that 75% of our workforce is going to need a post-secondary degree. So what is our constitutional obligation? And if it's in fact to provide a continuum from E through, post-secondary, then we ought to make sure that we provide at least, a good chunk of the financing. So I think we have to examine that model, and as I suggested, perhaps one approach is to bring industry in as a financial partner, not just as somebody who's saying, where's my workers? Perhaps we need to find other ways to have hybrid delivery of higher ed, a combination of the online, the MOOCs, the classroom experience. I think everything has to be on the table.
Okay, Chair Bonoff, we're out of time. We will pull you in closer to session and talk about your initiatives in 2015. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much.